Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Anidarus Nabila. Here I will explain my resume about Intro to Analytics. The first chapter is the origins of language. In Charles Darwin's vision of the origin of language, early humans has developed musical abilities before language and used them to attract one another. But it's an interesting speculation about how language might have originated. We suspect that some type of spoken language must have developed between 100,000 and 50,000 years ago, well before written language. The first is the divine source. In the biblical tradition, as described in the book of Genesis, God created Adam, and whatsoever Adam called every living creature, then was the name thereof. And the second is the natural sound source. The fact that all modern language have some words with pronunciation that seem to echo naturally occurring sound could be used to support this theory. And it has also been suggested that the original sound of language may have come from natural cries of emotion such as pain, anger, and joy. Basically, the expressive noises people make in emotional reaction contain sounds that are not otherwise used in speech production and consequently would seem to be rather unlikely candidates as source sound for language. The third is the social interaction source. Another proposal involving natural sound has been called the Yo-He-Hu theory. The idea is that the sound of a person involved in physical effort could be the source of our language, especially when the physical effort involves several people and the interaction has been coordinated. The appeal of this proposal is that it places the development of human language in a social context. This is an important idea that may relate to the uses of humanly produced sound. And for the next is the physical of adaptation source. Instead of looking at the types of sound as the resource of human speech, especially those that are distinct from other creators, which may have been able to support speech production. In the study of evolutionary development, there are certain physical features based of a spatial adaptation, which appear to be relevant to speech. They are streamlined versions of features found in other primates. The part of it is teeth, lip, mouth, larynx, and pharynx. Human teeth are upright, not slanting outward like those of apes. They are also very helpful in making sounds such as F or V. And human lips have much more intricate muscle interlocking that, than is found in other primates, and their resulting flexibility certainly helps in making sound like P or B. The human mouth is relatively small compared to other primates, can be opened and closed rapidly, and contains a smaller, thicker, and more muscular tongue, which can be used to shape a wide variety of sound inside the oral cavity, like ah, oh, like that. And the next topic is the tool making source. By about 2 million years ago, there is evidence that humans had developed preferential right-handedness and had become capable of making stone tools. Tool making are the outcome of manipulating objects and changing them using both hands. It's evidence of a brain at work. That those functions that control the motor movements involved in complex vocalization or speaking and object manipulation, making or using pulse are very close to each other in their left hemisphere of the brain. In terms of language structure, The human may have first developed a naming ability by producing a specific and consistent noise. The next topic is the genetic source. As a solution to the puzzle of the origin of language, this innate hypothesis would seem to point to something in human genetics, possibly a crucial mutation. As the source, we find our speculation about the origins of language moving away from fossil evidence or the physical source of basic human sound towards analogies with how computers work. The investigation of the origin of language then turns into a search for the special language gene that only humans possess. Okay, for the next, I will answer the tax of the origin of language. The first question is, what is the connection between the Heimlich maneuver and the development of human speech? The answer is the connection between the Heimlich maneuver and the development of human speech is that both movements try to push air out through the lungs that avoids any obstruction in the air passage to allow vocalization involving the vocal cords. For the third question is what are the arguments for and against a theological explanation of the origin of human language? The answer is the arguments for or against the te- telego- teleological explanation of the origins of human language depend on the biological adaptation through natural selection and other stories from when language came and to be about during this time. And for the next question is in his analysis of the beginning of human language, William Foley comes to the conclusion that language as we understand it was born about 200,000 years ago. This is substantially earlier than the dates between 100,000 and 1,500,000 years ago that other scholars have proposed. What kind of evidence and arguments are typically presented in order to choose a particular date when language was born? Yet, the answer is yet. Among the traces of earlier periods of life on Earth, we never find any direct evidence or artifacts relating to the speech of our distant ancestors that might tell us how language was back in the early stage. Perhaps because of this absence of direct physical evidence, there has been no shortage of speculation about the origin of human speech. For the next chapter is animals and human language. First is communication. We should first distinguish between specifically communicative signal and those which may be unintentionally informative signal. Someone listening to you may become informed about you through a number of signals that you have not intentionally sent. For example, she may note that you have a cold because you sneezed. And then the property of human language. Humans are clearly able to reflect on language and its uses. The property of reflectivity or reflexiveness account for the fact that we can use language to think and talk about language itself, making it one of the distinguishing features of human language. We will look in detail at another five of them, like displacement, arbitrariness, productivity, cultural transmission, and duality. First is displacement. Humans can refer to past and future time. This property of human language is called displacement. It allows language user to talk about things and even not present in the immediate environment. And the second is arbitrariness. It is generally the case that there is no natural connection between a linguistic form and its meaning. The linguistic form has no natural or iconic relationship with that hairy four-legged barking object out in the world. This aspect of the relationship between linguistic scenes and objects in the world is described as arbitrariness. And the third is productivity. Humans are continually creating new expression and novel utterance by manipulating their linguistic resource to describe new object and situation. This property is described as productivity or creativity or open-endedness and essentially means that the potential number of utterances in any human language is infinite. And the fourth is cultural transmission. This process whereby a language is passed on from one generation to the next is described as cultural transmission. Cultural transmission of a specific language is crucial in the human acquisition process. Five is duality. Human language is organized at two levels or layers simultaneously. This property is called duality or double articulation. Among other characters, each communicative signal appears to be a single fixed form that cannot be broken down into separated parts. And for the next is talking to animals. If these properties of human language make it such as unique communication system, quite different from the communication system of other creators, then it will seem extremely unlikely that other creators will be able to understand it. The standard explanation is that the animal produces a particular behavior in response to a particular sound stimulus or noise, but does not actually understand what the word in the noise means. The next is chimpanzees and language. The idea of raising a chimp and a child together may seem like a nightmare, but this is basically what was done in an early attempt to teach a chimpanzees to use human language. In retrospect, this was a remarkable achievement science since it has become clear that non-human primates do not actually have a physical structure, vocal tract which is suitable for articulating the sound used in speech. Chimpanzee was being told by Anne and David Primack to use a set of plastic shapes for the purpose of communicating with humans. These plastic shapes represented words that could be arranged in sequence to build sentences. Sarah preferred a vertical order. Sarah was systematically trained to associate this shape with object or action. This chimpanzee, this chimpanzee called Sarah. A similar training technique with another artificial language was used by Duane Rumberg to train a chimpanzee called Lana. The language she learned was called Yerkish and consisted of a set of symbols on a large keyboard linked to a computer. When Lana wanted some water, she had to press for symbol in the correct sequence to produce the message, please machine, give me a water. Controversy on the basis of his work with another chimpanzee called Nim, the psychologist Herbert Teres argued that chimpanzees are simply producing in response to the demand of people and tend to repeat things those people use. Yet, they are treated by naive researchers as if they are taking part in a conversation. And we could then say that there are at least two ways of thinking about what using language means in very broad sense. Language to serve as a type of communication system that can be observed in a variety of different situations. And now I will answer the question from the animal and human language chapter. The first question is any study of communication involving animals and humans. There is sometimes a reference to the clever Hans phenomenon. Who and what was clever Hans? Why was he famous? And what exactly is the phenomenon? The answer is clever Hans is a horse. Clever Hans could perform arithmetic and intellectual tasks. The phenomenon was the observer expectancy effect. The second question is we recognize a distinction early in this chapter between communicative and informative signal. How would body language be characterized? Also, what kind of signaling is involved in distance zones? What about eye contact and eyebrow flashes? The answer is body language will be characterized as informative signals. The kind of signaling involved in distance zones is feeling discomfort during interaction with someone who has more contact toward others. The kind of signaling involved in eye contact and eyebrow flashes is when people unconsciously let others know that they are ready for social contact with one another. And the third question is what is meant by sound symbolism and how does it relate to a property of arbitrariness? The answer is sound symbolism is a type of onomatopoeia and relates to certain language sound that associate with physical characteristics. Sound symbolism relates to the property of arbitrariness by tendency rather than dependable connection, as they can have an associative meaning rather than a conceptual one. I think it's enough. Please apologize if there are any mistake. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.